Hello everyone, on today's video we're going to be taking a look at the different vertical slash climb slash descent autopilots available in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Now the first thing is a lot of people were super excited probably when they saw this title and said, hey, he's going to do something on vertical navigation. As of right this second, again this is the beginning of January in 2020, vertical navigation is not an option when it comes to general aviation. It is an option when it comes to airliners, and we will take a look at that a little later on in the video. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about altitude as well as how to get to that altitude. So first things first, whenever you're doing any sort of work with an altitude, as you can see, we're coming up on some pretty nasty mountains in just a moment here. We're flying basically over southern Mexico, in case you're curious. We need to go ahead and tell the automatic pilot what altitude we want to be traveling to. So the first thing we want to do is we want to come over and dial it in. Let's say I want to go up to an altitude of, let's say 10,000 feet. After you've dialed in the altitude you wish to go to, I'm going to go pause for a second so I don't go crashing. You then need to specify what method you're going to get to that altitude. Now we have four basic different methods of doing one. The first one, VNAV, like I said, we're not going to have access to just yet. We will pretty soon. I believe there's an update coming out in February for it. We have the flick button, which is also known as a flight level change. We have the vertical speed button, and then we have the manual pitch option. The problem is with the manual pitch option is it won't automatically stop when we get to our altitude. So let's go ahead and take a look at each one of those methods in turn. The manual pitch option is pretty simple. I'm simply going to disable my automatic pilot. I'm going to lift my nose up to a desired angle I wish to climb at, let's say 7.5 degrees, and I'm going to press my autopilot arm button. Notice that the aircraft now holds itself at the position I've just defined it as. As a matter of fact, not only can I set the manual pitch by just turning the automatic pilot on like this, but you're also going to notice I've got the thing that says pit here, which means I'm now traveling at that manual pitch setting. Now, one of the problems with manual pitch mode is it will not stop when you get to the desired altitude you want to. And this is when we're going to be taking a look at the other methods for getting up and down as well. Now, some aircraft have what they call control wheel steering, which is this little button here, giving the ability to basically fix with this when you would normally be climbing. Now, an interesting thing that a lot of people will notice is in some autopilots, you can actually use the vertical speed wheel here to actually adjust the pitch of the aircraft as it climbs. We don't have that capability in this particular one, unfortunately for us, but normally you would see that. So that's going to take a look at our other two methods now. The first one is flight level change. This is my personal favorite method. This gives us the ability to change our altitude by traveling at a set speed, maintaining a constant indicated airspeed, I should say. So I'm actually going to press the flick button real quickly. What you'll notice is the aircraft nose down, and now it is trying to find itself going up and down to maintain an indicated airspeed of 172 knots. You can see right now that I'm holding about 171. It's a little windy today, so it doesn't surprise me. Now, if, for example, I reduced my throttle, let's say you can already see I accidentally knocked the throttle. Let's say I knock my throttle down to 80-85%. You'll notice the nose went down. However, my indicated airspeed remained exactly the same. So the advantage here is if air traffic control starts giving you instructions to do a particular thing one way or the other, now you don't have to worry about keeping that constant speed. Folks who are instrument pilots love that feature. So that's flight level change mode. Again, one of the nice things about flight level change mode is I can click it, set the speed I want, and then go ahead and do it later on. So let's say, for example, I want to climb up to 15,000 feet. Again, there's some pretty nasty mountains here in southern Mexico. I'm going to kind of watch out for that. Zoom in just a teeny tiny bit. Let's say I press the flick button now. You'll notice the aircraft pitches up a teeny tiny bit. The reason of this is because my engine is basically working as hard as it possibly can in order to maintain this speed and climb at the same time. Now, let's say I want to get up there really, really casually. I can now use my up and down wheel to go ahead and do something like this. Let's say I set this to 210 knots or so. Go doot, doot. Now the nose will pitch down, get me 210 knots, and then continue that nice gentle climb upwards. I'm making myself just a teeny tiny bit more torque here. I've already got quite a bit in. So now the aircraft is going to climb relatively flat. I'm actually going to check for icing real quick. Yeah, we're good. It's going to climb relatively flat compared to how it would do otherwise. If I want to make the climb rate increase, I can just come over here and I can decrease my selected airspeed. So in this case, I always get that backwards in this version. I can now do something crazy like say, hey, I want to climb at 150 knots. So in order for this aircraft to accommodate that request, it's basically going to have to pretend it's a rocket ship and pitch up like this in order to maintain that desired speed. You can see I'm getting something like 3,500 feet per minute. Obviously, that's not going to last because as soon as I start going up, you're going to see this number start dropping. Once it stabilizes at 150, we're probably going to be getting about 1,800 feet per minute. You can see my torque is starting to get back into the white again. Let me back my throttle up just a teeny tiny bit. So the nice thing about the flight level change mode is now you have the ability to go ahead and dial exactly how much climb speed you want, but not necessarily your vertical speed, which again is going to be a little bit different. Okay, let's go ahead and continue this climb here. By the way, this is wonderful in airliners, and it's the default method of climbing in airliners. So go ahead and cruise up and look at the old-fashioned flight simulator method, at least in my opinion. So when I first did flight sims way back in the day, we didn't have a flight level change button. We had this guy called vertical speed. What vertical speed would do is it would allow you to define what speed you'd like to climb at, independent of all the other variables. So let's go ahead and get a little bit more altitude here, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that. Let me speed up time just a tiny bit here. We're going to go up to that 15,000. Notice now that we've stabilized at 150 knots, we're not climbing nearly as fast as we were a minute ago. Go ahead and reduce time just a little bit. We're doing okay, normal time. You can see we've gotten well over the clouds very, very quickly. So vertical speed mode gives you the ability to define how fast you want the aircraft to go up or down. Now, there's a couple of interesting quirks to vertical speed, and this throws people for a loop sometimes. I'm going to shut altitude hold mode off. I'm going to press the vertical speed button. I'm going to go down, 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 down. Now, you'll notice that even though I pressed down, the aircraft is now going down, and it's never, ever, ever going to stop going down until it finds itself with one of these nearby mountains. The reason for that is because I will never hit the altitude I've defined. Now, if I actually come up here and press up a bunch of times, let's say I'm going to do 500 feet per minute up, notice the aircraft will continue to climb upwards until it reaches that target altitude, hence the little outs button right here. So now, if I want to have a little bit of fun with this, I could do something like, I'm going to go ahead and level the aircraft off, which immediately cancels out vertical speed mode. Let me set this to something like, I'll do 18,000 feet. I'm going to press vertical speed. I'm going to press up, 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 up. So now the aircraft is going to ignore my velocity, and it's going to do everything it can by just pitching the nose of the aircraft to get me at 1,000 feet per minute. Now you're probably sitting there going, hey, this is cool. I can go nuts with this, right? Don't do that. Let me show you why. Let me go ahead and crank this to, we'll do 3,000 feet per minute. Look at that. We're managing 3,000 feet per minute. This is going great. We're going to get to 18,000 feet in no time. Now that you've got this thing climbing like a rocket ship, what do you notice about our airspeed? More importantly, what are you starting to notice about our angle of attack? Yes, we are starting to slowly pull ourselves into a position where we're going to stall the aircraft. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring up my desired altitude up to 19,000. These are always kind of fun to play with. And I'm going to increase my vertical speed even more. Let's do 3,500. Now, let's do 4,000 feet per minute upwards. Oh yeah, now we're just a fighter plane, like a PC-12 here. All right, and we're climbing pretty well so far. Everything seems to be going well. You know, I want even more vertical speed. Give me 5,000 feet per minute. And we already got to our target altitude. I need to crank this up even higher. And make it 22,000 feet, right? And we'll go ahead and play with this just a little bit. Vertical speed mode, give me 6,000 feet per minute. Yeah, look at that. Any number we dial, this thing climbs. Love it. Does not feel right? Yeah, we're fine. 6,000 feet per minute. This is amazing. Oh boy. All right, notice it starts to level off. Notice the aircraft is smart enough not to stall itself. Unfortunately for us, we lost our wonderful 6,000 feet per minute. Sigh. So you can see that no matter what number you dial in, your aircraft has to actually be capable of the number that you actually dialed in there. So that's one of the downsides to vertical speed mode. Okay, so what about descent? Descent can be done the same exact way. The first method we could use is, as I showed you earlier, we could actually pitch the nose downwards and just kind of get going on a descent, and then we could turn on the automatic pilot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set our new target altitude. I feel so sorry for our passengers here. Their ears must be exploding. Of course, we are pressurized, so it can't be too bad. Well, I might as well turn the oxygen on, right? Which one of these switches is oxygen? There you go. Enjoy. Now you can breathe. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel the autopilot. I'm going to pitch the aircraft about 3.5 degrees, so 2.5 right there. I'm going to go ahead and tap that, and you can see my altitude hold mode button literally hijacked my efforts to go ahead and descend. So I'm going to go ahead and point the nose down one more time like this. And I'm going to turn on the automatic pilot, and you can see we are now in what they call pitch mode. And this is indicated right there. I'll make sure navigation's still on. Now the aircraft is going to maintain this 2.5, it's like 3 degrees downwards until we crash into the ground. Remember, whenever you're doing a pitch change using a vertical speed mode, you're always going to get stuck like that. So, and again, I'm just accelerating. So now let's say I want to use flight level change. So I'm going to press flick. So now notice the flight level change assumes I want 200 knots. Unfortunately, my engine's still going full blast, which means I will never descend. If anything, the only way I can get this aircraft to descend now is by reducing the amount of thrust I'm producing. If I reduce the amount of thrust that I'm producing, then I will start to descend again. Notice even that wasn't enough reduction. I'm actually going to pull the throttle all the way to 0 here. There we go. Now notice in flight level change, our descent rate is controlled now by our throttle position. If I back this up to, let's say, 10% like that, you can see that's going to give me a slight reduction in vertical speed, but my indicated airspeed is going to remain identical. So, if I sat here and said, I'm going to give you a 20% throttle here, which is a little bit, you can see now that my vertical speed is even less, but my airspeed is staying roughly the same, which is the advantage to using the system again. So let's go ahead and level off when we get down to 18,000 feet, and we'll take a look at vertical speed mode. Again, vertical speed mode requires a little bit of common sense when you use it. Go ahead and level off. Go ahead and apply full power. Not full power, the usual amount. So now let's go ahead and crank down our altitude. Notice the moment you pass the altitude button, it's going to automatically override everything you did for hard work. Let's set it to 10,000 feet again. And I'm going to go ahead and, actually, let's go even lower. I'm really going to blow some eardrums here. There we go, 7,000 feet. So now I'm going to press the vertical speed button, and I'm just going to press down a lot. Let's do, what do we do, 6,000 feet per minute up? Let's do a good solid 4,000 feet per minute down. There we go, 4,000 feet per minute. Now, if you were in a non-pressurized plane, this would be the most miserable experience you've ever experienced. Okay, look at that. 4,000 feet per minute, man. We're going to get down to that waypoint we were asked to get down to, no problem at all. Man, this is just the greatest. I can't wait to get down to that altitude, not have to worry about anything. Things are going to go swimming. Just look out the window. At least we're going in the correct direction. And look at this. I'm even getting, uh-oh. And there comes the problem. So when you do things like this, you still need to be thinking about your throttle position. In this case, I'm still pretty close to full throttle here. And as a result, I am redlining the airplane. And right now, this whole thing is buffeting and it's getting a little angry. Yeah, you can hear that pretty close. Oh my gosh, I don't want to take the wings off, so I better reduce my throttle a little bit. So that's one of the downsides of vertical speed mode, is you're not going to have as clean control of your actual speed. I'm actually going to back this throttle all the way, because 4,000 feet per minute is a lot. Okay, there we go. Whew, all my alarms stopped flashing at me. And of course, we're going to cruise back down to 7,000 feet without too much difficulty. So in quick review here, you have basically the 4 different methods to go ahead and go up and down. We'll take a look at VNAV in just a second. We have the vertical speed button, which you can use this wheel to go ahead and dial in exactly how much speed you want to go up or down. You have the flight level change mode, which is going to hold a constant speed downwards. You have the pitch mode, where basically you point the plane where you want it, press the autopilot button. Remember, that one will not stop when you get to your targeted altitude. And of course, you have everybody's favorite vertical speed mode as well. Now, I've mentioned a little bit about VNAV and airliners and how it works, so we might as well take a look at that, right? It's actually kind of a nice day here for once. So we're sitting here in a lovely Boeing 787 now, and we're sitting right at the end. This is runway 24 at Bradley International. Yeah, it's kind of my go-to airport, sorry. So VNAV in airliners is a little different. Basically what you're doing is you're letting the airliner control both the speed that you're climbing at, as well as the engine power, as well as the target altitude that you're going to be traveling at. Now, on this particular aircraft, we've got this handy-dandy little FMS down here. You can... Okay, programmer number 4, make sure you do math.round left parenthesis. Yeah, I'm not going to even get into that. You know what I mean. But you're going to notice that each one of these waypoints is going to have a unique altitude associated with it. So, if I come in here and start taking a look at this, you can see all my different waypoints along my entire little trip here as it kind of goes along just like that. And if I pop over to the next page, ooh, where's my next page button on the right side? I couldn't see it. Now you'll notice, there we go, flight level 159 is right there. You'll notice I've got this A, which means at or above 10,000 feet, 9,500, 9,000. This means that this aircraft will not descend beyond this point or exceed this selected speed until it crosses this particular waypoint. Folks in European airliners and European flying, what's that? I think that's Air Europe. We'll also know the fact that in Europe, there's the ability to fly over versus fly by waypoints. And there's actually a lot more control over this, not for today's discussion. I just want to show you what VNAV looks like at the airliner level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and select both VNAV as well as LNAV. LNAV refers to left and right, aka lateral navigation. V stands for vertical navigation. I'm then going to dial in the maximum altitude that I'm allowed to go to, just like that. I'm going to set that to, let's see, True 4000. Looks pretty good, flight level 240. And now, basically, all I have to do is press the go button on this aircraft, and it will do this entire flight for me. The only thing I need to do is when I do get up to the altitude I need to be cruising at, I need to lower this number in order to tell it that it's okay to go ahead and start descending. Let's go ahead and take sure everything's all right. Looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here with my head. There's this handy dandy button that says the word toga. It's not that toga, I'm sorry. Sometimes it's kind of fun to get to. Highly recommend you actually bind a button. So I click that, and now my entire flight is automatic. I'm going to go ahead and now make sure the brakes are released. And let's go. That's it. So now you can see that not only is my aircraft being controlled as far as my engine settings, I haven't touched my throttle yet, by the way. It also controls what altitude I'll be at and what speed I'll be at, depending on what waypoint you are at. Now, the interesting thing is this was all done by using basically the flight plan creator built into Microsoft Flight Simulator. If I wanted to do this stuff by hand, I totally could if I had a really solid working FMS. Now, when you're working on things like the G3000 or the G3X, you actually do have the ability to define your specific speeds that you want to use for given waypoints. But unfortunately for us, it doesn't actually follow those, at least not yet. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. Again, I'll probably be eating those words in a little while, but that's perfectly fine. Get up a little tiny bit of altitude here. Again, we want to travel at a V2 speed. There is a noise abatement procedure at this particular airport. So I'm going to cruise kind of steeply until we get to about 1,000 feet, and then we can start doing all of our usual stuff. Again, I have not touched the thrust. I'm only touching my lateral controls here. All right, push the nose over just a teeny tiny bit. We cross that 1,000 feet point. I'm going to go bring up that first notch of flaps. Again, we got a fly-by-wire in a 787, so it's a little different. Nose coming down. I'm not going to activate the autopilot yet. Just want to build up a little bit of speed here. We are pretty heavy. Apparently, everybody's got their winter clothes in the back seat, so that kind of thing happens. All right, building up just a little bit more speed here. I personally think that the flaps have just a little bit too much drag. A 787 is a very aerodynamic aircraft. Hold it there for a moment, hold it there. Activate the automatic pilot. Now notice, if you take a look at my little autopilot, my little heads-up display screen, the HUGs, you'll notice that speed is now referenced, lateral navigation is referenced, and VNAV speed is now being referenced. When you combine all those together, you'll realize that my engine is being controlled by the flight computer, as well as my vertical speed, which you can see has been blanked out, as well as my desired altitude. So this aircraft now is completely on automatic. I don't have to touch a thing. The engine will automatically throttle down. As a matter of fact, if there were an emergency, for example, and I needed to go ahead and level the aircraft off, I could reach over here and mash this altitude hold button. It would hold that altitude, and then all I'd have to do is push the button in again, and it would automatically start climbing right from where I left off without me having to make any changes whatsoever. Now, where this is most dramatic is when you're going to be on your descent. You can see here we're just reaching the top of descent, and ascent, I should say. And you'll notice that on the real aircraft, there would normally be a little line right here that would say top of ascent, basically your top of climb, TOC. Since this does not calculate that dynamically, we lose a couple of the neat little features related to this particular functionality, which is kind of a bummer. But you can see that now that I've reached my actual altitude that I'm climbing at, since I'm still in VNAV and LNAV here, the engines throttle themselves down automatically to my desired cruise speed. Now, what makes this amazing, and this is one of the reasons everybody loves these particular systems, is you can come in here and you can actually tweak some of that. Like you'll notice that, let's see here, zero fuel weight, stuff like that, yeah. So in a real one, you could actually come in here and go nuts as far as changing things like your cost index, which is only 100 right now. You know, if I wanted to, I could come in here. Let me go ahead and clear that out. I really wish I could grab this and pull this out of the way, but if I do that, you know how that's going to end. Let's say I do 99999 or something like that. Now, if I define that as my cost index, the aircraft would normally select a higher airspeed because it would be using more fuel in order to get me a further distance here. The weather here, by the way, is absolutely wonderful. It's been extremely gray the last few weeks, and it's kind of nice to finally be able to see. I like that atmospheric haze especially. Now, what would happen normally is when you are using VNAV technology, you'd have a little line that would tell you that it's time to start descending. We have something like that here, but this is actually a waypoint here. This isn't our actual we're going to start descending point. But what you actually could do, depending on the aircraft, is you could actually turn on a data mode where you could turn on the individual pieces. You know, if I come up here like this and click this, you'll notice notice it'll actually list the desired altitude at those different positions as well as the speed restrictions. You can see it's a little cluttered is the word I'm going to use here when you do turn that on. But if we were zoomed in a little bit, you'd be able to see the individual points, which we'll check out in a moment. So now normally what you would do is, you can see we're a little bit closer, is you'd simply tell the automatic, you'll do that 100 times by the way, is you'd simply tell the automatic pilot exactly what altitude that you want to set as your floor. And what would normally happen with VNav enabled is you would start its actual descent mode to go ahead and get you down to that destination. You can see that right now at LRP, since we're not calculating that top of descent, we're not actually going to trigger that early moment where we're going to start going downwards. But you're going to notice when we hit duress that we're actually going to start heading down there as well. We'll go ahead and speed up time a teeny tiny bit here so you can kind of watch it in action, so to speak. Man, I wish these real airliners went this fast. This would be a much, much quicker trip. Whoop, just passed by a major airport. You can tell it just flew under the bottom of us there. Again, whenever you accelerate time, things get a little bit funky, but again, this isn't too bad. You always got to kind of keep one eye on the clock whenever you do something like this. And there would be the point where it would start its descent. Now notice it is not descending. Now that's kind of interesting. Of course, I could come over here and bop that button, and basically that would say, you have my approval to start your descent process. And you notice as soon as I press that, we've now selected a new descent position of 19,000 feet, but I'm setting the floor as 9,000. So now the aircraft is going to do a flight level change descent automatically, and it will spool the engines down for you automatically as well. Remember, when you're descending with VNav on, you have to give it approval by bopping this thing in the center to go ahead and basically delete that altitude constraint. It's not going to do it automatically for you because of the fact that we don't have that top of descent calculation built in. So now if I speed up time a little tiny bit here, theoretically, we're going to go ahead and keep that speed down. Again, I haven't touched the throttle since I pressed the toga button. We're now going to be traveling down, and this is going to be our floor for each one of our specific altitudes. I'm actually going to help things along here a little bit so I can kind of demonstrate a little bit more clearly. A little bit of difficulty crossing that particular last waypoint there. Make sure you don't accidentally do anything. Notice, by the way, that this indicated idle to say that it has idled the engines out in order to improve my descent rate. Of course, with that last pass over there, we're going awfully quick, and it's just going to kind of rotate us down to the Baltimore area. All right, hopefully that video was helpful as far as seeing kind of the relationship between all these different pieces. Again, eventually we'll have a video where we can kind of show off how to do some of this stuff on the general aviation side, but I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with all the different methods that can be involved in making an aircraft descend or ascend. Enjoy.